Recording in progress.
Is this part of your thing, the table?
What's that?
This is over here?
No, that's the library. I just put some
Program flyers.
community solar flyers up there.
Oh, okay. I was at a planning board meeting the other night. I had to, something in front of the planning board.
These people are on
Recording
time.
in progress.
All right, welcome and good evening. My name's Steve Sia, and I am the co-chair of the Nyack Climate Smart Committee. And the committee was created a climate action plan to address climate change locally. We call this initiative Nyack 2030. And this workshop is part of the Nyack 2030 initiative to reduce carbon emissions in Nyack 75% by 2030. So I'm assuming that you're here because you understand the urgent need to reduce our carbon emissions and believe that actions that we take can make a difference. So I'm going to provide a good deal of information this evening to get you thinking about the opportunities to reduce your carbon footprint. So up front, I want you to know that you're not alone. We can put you in touch with climate ambassadors. Those are people in the community willing to share their experience related to climate actions that they've taken. And the nyack2030.com website also has plenty of resources to guide you through the decarbonization process. So there are many actions that we could take personally to lower our carbon emissions. The actions can be low impact, something like replacing your LED bulbs, or it could have high impact, such as changing the foods that we eat or the level of consumption. But this workshop is going to focus on energy-related emissions in your home. So some 42% of those emissions are decisions that we make around the kitchen table, where we get our electricity, the cars we drive, how we heat our homes and water, how we cook our food, and how we dry our clothes. So the basic concept is this: if we can use 100% renewable, clean electricity and switch our appliances from fossil fuels to electric, then we can reduce our carbon output and emissions. With this strategy we could reduce the bulk of our home emissions and take a huge step forward on the path to carbon neutrality. And I just want you to all know I am no expert, but I have some direct experience with the actions we're going to be discussing this evening. I've switched most of my appliances to electric, including an electric vehicle, heat pump heating and cooling, a heat pump hot water heater, an induction stove. I've also installed solar panels and battery storage and an EV charger. I want you all to know that I'm not here to sell anything. I just want my community to do its part to leave the next generation a better world. So this is an overview of what we're going to be discussing this evening. We're going to go through the process of planning to switch from fossil fuel appliances to electric. And the first order of business is to secure 100% renewable energy. And since the electric is carbon-free, anything we run on that electricity will also be carbon-free. We're going to check to make sure that you have enough capacity in your home, enough electrical service for the appliances that you might add. We're going to take an inventory of those appliances and identify the ones that use fossil fuels. Then I'm going to show you a planning process to switch to electric appliances based on either their useful life, the cost, various incentives, and look at the timeline if you desire to reduce your carbon footprint more quickly. As far as the incentives go, we're going to look at each incentive for each of the various appliances, but there are some additional incentives available through the NYSERDA, which is a state organization, and we'll talk about those at the end. So the first step is to secure renewable electricity. And you can get your electricity from a number of different sources. You can participate in the Community Choice Aggregation Program. You can get your electric directly from Orange and Rockland utility. You may have a contract with an energy services company, or you may generate your own electricity through rooftop solar. So the good news is that 86% of Nyack and the surrounding area has already taken this first step. The village has arranged for default energy to be 100% renewable through a program called Community Choice Aggregation. So how do you know if you're participating in that program? Well, you could take a look at your electric bill. You could see this section of your electric bill, I blew it up, has two areas that say CCA, and that stands for Community Choice Aggregation. So in this bill, Constellation New Energy is the provider for the CCA, and they're doing it for Rockland Community Power. And if you don't see this on your bill, or there's another supplier, you can join the CCA by contacting Rockland Community Power to switch. You may get your power through a energy services company. It's called an ESCO. And this is a contract to purchase electricity through a third-party provider. And some ESCOs do provide renewable electricity, but that's something you really need to check. And to help you do that, and if you want to switch from an ESCO, again, I would suggest that you call Rockland Community Power. They could take you through that process. At this point, I do want to mention a community solar campaign that the village is running. And this is not, doesn't require you to change your current source of electricity. It's a way to support the generation of renewable energy and receive a discount of upwards of 5%. The campaign is something that Nyack is putting on, and the village will receive a $50,000 grant if it can get 160 signups. There, I put some flyers in the back, and the flyer has a QR code where you.
Question.
Yes.
Is it residential or is it the multi-use buildings as well?
If you pay your own electric bill, then you should be eligible for it. I got that right? Good. So I urge you all to participate and sign up for the community solar and put us on our way to getting that $50,000 grant. There's also the last option is to generate your own renewable power through rooftop solar. So the advantages of generating your own energy is that it reduces your electric bills. After incentives, it could pay for itself within 7 to 10 years through the savings on your electric bill. After that point, your electricity is free, except for a small service charge that Orange and Rockland charges. You can combine these with batteries in order to power your home during a power outage. And what's becoming more and more important, it increases the supply of renewable power locally and will address some anticipated higher demands as people use more and more electricity. To see if your home is a good candidate, I put up a couple of websites that I suggest you take a look at. The first is Google Project Sunroof. This image here is from that website. So Google has essentially mapped the area, and if you plug in some information like your address and your average utility bill, electric bill, you could get a sense of whether your rooftop is a good candidate for solar power. The bright yellow indicates roofs that are very good, and then the muted orange color are roofs that, in this case, you could see it's surrounded by trees. It's less eligible for rooftop solar, but the site will also give you estimates of what the cost would be, the payback period, and give you an idea of whether you're a good candidate. The next site, Energy Sage, does something similar. It'll give you an idea of what the cost would be, the incentives, what your payback would be. It goes the next step, and it could put you in touch with local installers that will give you a price. Alternatively, you can, talk to your neighbors. You could go to our website. You could identify some people that have put up solar in the community and contact, check if they're happy with it, and then contact them to see if you could get a proposal. Most of the quotes are free, and you can make a determination from there. So in terms of incentives, there are some very robust incentives for putting rooftop solar on. And through the course of the presentation, I'm going to mention two areas, NYSERDA and the IRA. NYSERDA is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, and they run the climate-related programs throughout the state of New York. The IRA is the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, and a good part of that act had tremendous benefits for climate action. And a lot of the rebates and tax credits that we're going to be discussing tonight are part of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. And you could tell from this that the benefits associated with or the incentives for putting up rooftop solar could be 55% of the cost can be offset by these incentives. So it really improves the likelihood that it's going to be affordable for more people. If you are installing solar, you should also consider battery storage. It complements rooftop solar. It functions as a generator if there's a loss in power. And there are other potential revenue sources through demand response. The demand response essentially is when the grid is at its peak and there's significant demand, there's a way to curtail that demand through battery backup systems. And if you have one in your home, then you can make an arrangement with the utility, and they can use your battery backup rather than using peaker plants, which are very expensive and produce a lot of carbon emissions. So those programs in this area are in their infancy, and we're looking that there may be more in the future. There are incentives for battery backup through the IRA. It's part of that 30% tax credit, but it's capped at $4,800. Now that we have renewable energy, let's discuss whether your home has the capacity to convert to electric. So generally speaking, you need about 150 to 200 amps of service in order to run a fully electric home. If you have less than 150, it may require a need for an upgrade to your service. But there are incentives through the IRA and the Federal Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate of up to $4,000 for panels and $2,500 for wiring to help offset the cost of that additional service. And it's important to realize throughout the presentation, when I refer to rebates or discounts, those although they're federal monies, are going to be administered by the states. And fortunately, New York State was one of the first to apply and put in for a methodology in which to apply those rebates and discounts to New York State residents, but it's being reviewed by the Department of Energy and has not yet been approved. So we're waiting on that, and the likelihood the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025, those will be in place. And you'll see the significance of that as we go through and take a look at some of the appliances that we need to electrify. So here's how you tell whether you have enough capacity. So everyone is familiar with their breaker box, and the smaller breakers are for the outlets and things within your home, but the main breaker is the one at the very top. And if you look at the switch, you can tell, usually printed right on it, what the main service into your home is. And in this case, it's 100 amps. So for this person, they probably will require an upgrade. And if you're going to change the panel, then I suggest that you also look at solar and EV charging and look at all the other appliances that may require additional electric service, because it'll be much more cost effective if you do all of that work at one time rather than doing it in piecemeal. Since you have the electrician there, you might as well do all the work and get you ready. So next, we're going to take inventory of all the appliances that run on fossil fuels and discuss the options for converting them to electric. So this image identifies all the appliances we'll be discussing tonight. We've already talked about solar and the electric panel. So let's review some of the others, starting with the biggest emitter, your car. So personal vehicles represent 20% of our overall emissions. And there's a progression from regular hybrid that uses mostly gas, but is supported by battery power, to a plug-in hybrid. Plug-in hybrid usually has a range of about 10 to 50 miles that runs on the battery, and then it defaults to gas. And then a fully electric vehicle has no internal combustion engine. It just operates on electricity. Now, some people have some range anxiety, and a plug-in hybrid may be a good transitional vehicle because of the nature of the that gas backup. The incentives only apply to plug-in hybrids and fully electric vehicles. The traditional hybrids do not qualify for the incentive programs. And here you could see that there are some decent incentives, both on the state level, a rebate at the point of purchase of up to $2,000, and on the federal level, a tax credit of $7,500 for new vehicles and $4,000 for used vehicles. And those tax credits depend on income and component parts. The higher and higher percentage of the components of the fully electric vehicles need to be sourced either from the US or from a favored trading partner. And that's going to be increasing over time. So this is a good opportunity to look closely at electric vehicles. I put the link actually under NYSERDA and the IRA to a couple of websites that will identify each vehicle and what their rebates are. So some of them are 500, some are 1,000, some are 2,000, but you could see all the vehicles and get a clear idea of what if they are eligible for any of these rebates and incentives. Yeah.
Just while you're saying that, we have, and we can share on the website, a database that Sustainable Hudson Valley has put together for the region, showing where dealers have
Available.
electric vehicles.
All right, great. So that's an important thing to realize. We had somebody go out and take an inventory of all the available vehicles, and we posted that on the Nyack 2030 website, or we will. So that leads me to the last item on this list, which is Drive Electric Nyack, which is a campaign to promote the purchase of electric vehicles in Nyack. And like the other campaign, there are certain thresholds, and if you hit those thresholds, you get grants. So we have 60 purchased vehicles since the inception of the campaign in November. If we hit 70, then Nyack will receive a total of $31,000 in grants for climate-related projects. So if you want more information about that, I urge you to go to the Nyack 2030 website and let us know if you purchase an electric vehicle. So if you do purchase an electric vehicle, you need to charge it. And home charging is a very big component, but it doesn't have to be that fancy. So a regular outlet can power about 5 miles of range per hour. And depending on your daily usage, level 1 would generate about 60 miles overnight. And that might be sufficient for your routine use. If you need more, you could go to a level 2 charger. And again, that could be an outlet or a wall-mounted unit. The outlet is similar to what you would put for an electric dryer or an electric oven. And the range for those is more like 20 to 60 miles an hour, so significantly more than level 1. Level 1 and level 2 are home charging. Level 3, really not designed for home charging. It's called fast charging, and it's usually best for extended trips. And the charging rates there are 60 to 100 miles for every 20 minutes. So if you're on the road, you should be looking for fast charging if you need to power up. So there aren't many incentives for home charging, but if you include it as part of your solar installation or battery installation, then it can be part of that 30% rebate. O&R has some instant rebates for home chargers, but it's fairly modest. So let's move on to heating and cooling. So there's a lot of buzz around heat pumps these days, and rightly so. Recently, in the last 2 years, there have been more heat pumps sold than gas furnaces. And there's a good reason, because they're very efficient. Even a gas boiler might have an efficiency of 90%. Radiant Electric has an efficiency of about 100%, but heat pumps have a 200 to 400% more efficient than conventional heating. So 1 kilowatt of energy can generate 3 to 4 kilowatts of heat. So how could that happen? And it's really because a heat pump doesn't generate heat. It simply moves heat from one place to another. So in the summer, it takes heat from your home and moves it outside. And in the winter, it takes heat from outside and moves it indoors. Even in below 0 temperatures, there's still heat outside that can be converted and brought into the home. It has a lot to do with refrigerants and pressure. And if you want more sophisticated explanation about the physics behind it, I put a link to This Old House Explains, and they have an 8-minute video that does a really great job in explaining the concept behind how a heat pump works.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
So what I see online, at certain temperatures, like 20 and below, they're not as good. Could you address that?
Sure. So that's true. And on the slide, you can see the different sources of heat pumps. There's air source, ground source, and cold climate heat pumps. So a cold climate heat pump is an air source heat pump. And it's designed specifically for cold climates, and it could handle efficiencies at colder temperatures. So in order to qualify for a to be a cold climate heat pump, it has to have, I think, 200% efficiency at -5 degrees. So they do function below that level, but they just are not as efficient. So I think if you hit it like -17 degrees, it becomes 100% efficient. But for a heat pump, that's still good, but it's not as generates more cost as the efficiency goes down in order to heat the thing. So in this area, we rarely get extended periods at those temperatures. And if you size it right, it should be able to maintain the heat. But I'm glad you brought that up, because there's another component when you're looking at a heat pump, and that's weatherization. So weatherization means that you're insulating and air sealing your home so that you don't have a lot of drafts, you don't have a lot of hot air, conditioned air escaping into the outside. And we'll talk about an energy audit in a little bit, but you could conduct an energy audit. Someone will come in and assess your insulation and air sealing and make recommendations for improvements. And if you are planning on installing a heat pump, then it's prudent to do a weatherization study and an energy audit. And here you could see, to your point earlier about the efficiencies, that's where the ground source heat pump comes in. Ground source heat pump essentially drills wells and runs coolant through those wells. And because the temperature in the ground is fairly consistent, you don't have to worry about drastically reduced temperatures, either high or low. You're not trying to get heat out of a 0-degree temperature, because it's stable at about 50 degrees underground. And you're not dumping heat into 100-degree temperature, you're dumping heat into a 50-degree well. So they're much more efficient, but they're also much more expensive. And the IRA has a tax credit of 30% for ground source installations. And based on the average throughout the country, that the average benefit there is about $7,200. I mentioned the rebates are pending federal approval, and this heat pump rebate is also part of that basket of rebates that we're waiting for state approval on. But that could be upwards of $8,000. O&R also has a rebate of $1,000 that apply to heat pumps, either for heating and cooling or for hot water. And if you heat your home using electric resistance heating, fuel oil, or propane, then you're going to see some big savings switching to a heat pump. Those savings are harder to achieve if you have natural gas, and a lot of people in this area have natural gas. And whether you generate savings will depend on the installation that you have and the various incentives that you qualify for. So heat pump hot water heater also qualifies for the clean heating and cooling campaign. This is the third and final campaign that the village is running. This campaign can generate $50,000 if we get 30 heat pumps installed in Nyack. And then again, those investments will go to climate related projects. So all of these campaigns have an extra benefit. They generate points toward a larger grant. And we are looking to qualify for the largest of the grants of $375,000 in additional grant funds. And these campaigns will help us get to that goal. So the heat pump hot water heater may require new electric service if you have a natural gas hot water heater currently. but there are some significant savings, or I should say incentives, for installing a heat pump hot water heater. There's a 30% tax credit of up to $2,000 from the IRA. That federal home electrification and appliance rebate, not yet in place, but that could be upwards of $1,750. And that Orange and Rockland rebate that I mentioned, that counts for hot water heaters as well. So combining these together, it's very likely that you can spend less on a replacement hot water heater by putting a heat pump in than going with a regular gas powered hot water heater. So something to keep in mind and keep an eye on.
And what kind of electric service, the 240 volt?
Probably, yeah. Because you don't need the 240 to run the heat pump aspect of it, but you need it for backup if you have, there are electric elements in it in case you have a high demand or you want to use that to speed up the heating process. Most of them come with a backup heating element that runs on 240, 220. So we took some of the grant money that we received from some of the campaigns and we use it to offset the cost of the permitting for the installation of heat pumps. We're just starting to stand up that program now, so there's more details to follow, but we want to incentivize people to put in heat pumps, and the Villages is doing its part by offsetting the cost of the permits. Next, we'll get into cooking. So induction is a better way to cook with electricity. It works differently from a traditional electric cooktop that has those coils and creates a hot surface. It uses electromagnetic current through the cook to heat up the cookware itself. And it provides a number of benefits. First, it's faster. Induction cooktops they boil hot water faster than gas or traditional electric. They're also safer, so that because it doesn't heat the surface and just heats the cookware, that surface is cooler than it would be under a traditional electric stove. And it improves air quality because you're not combusting a fossil fuel in your home and all the emissions that entails. So it's also easier to clean, and take my word for it. I do the cleaning of the cooktop and it's much easier than conventional stoves, either gas or electric. So a couple of things you may note. It may require new electricity if you don't have electric going to the, probably a 240 going to the kitchen already. And it may require new cookware, and you could tell whether whether you will be required to change your cookware through a simple test. All you need to do is get a magnet and a pan, and if it sticks, then it'll work with an induction stove. And cast iron is great. Some stainless steel is also good. Some enamel cookware is great. So that's an easy way to tell. And if you always wanted new cookware, and this is an excuse to get it. So even if it sticks, you don't have to tell your spouse about that. We have an induction stove at home. We both are converts. My wife and I just love it. And lastly, the final appliance are clothes dryers. So even if you have an electric dryer, you may want to consider an upgrade to a heat pump for all of these reasons. They're much more efficient. They last longer than a conventional dryer. There's no outside venting, so there's no cleaning the vent. You could put them anywhere. You actually don't even need a drain. They have a reservoir, and you could just If you want to be bothered dumping it, you can just dump the water that collects. There are some disadvantages. So the capacity is smaller than a conventional dryer, but that's changing. There are some on the market that are comparable to conventional dryers. There's a longer drying time, even with the efficiency, that's still a longer drying time, and it may require new electric depending on the model. There are some models that run on 110, but you may need 220, 240, depending on the model that you get. Yes?
Do you need a permit for this, for the village, since it doesn't have venting and, as you said, kitchen drain or anything like that?
So you don't need a permit unless you're running new electric. So I would check with the building department just to make sure, but there's no need for venting because there's no exhaust. It's a self-contained unit. So, think of a dehumidifier. Dehumidifier doesn't require a permit. You're plugging it in and it's taking water out of the air and putting it into a reservoir. It's the same concept. So we are done with the inventory. Now let's take a look at the planning process. So Rewiring America is just a great website. I can't recommend it enough. Rewiring America is a nonprofit with a mission to promote electrification to reduce carbon emissions. And they've got some great tools, some absolutely fantastic resources. One tool, for example, is an incentive calculator. So if you go to the website and you plug in some information that the IRA needs in order to determine what your incentives are, it will calculate the different incentives that you would qualify for based on your income, your location, and some of the things that you want to do that we just discussed. They also have this planning tool. So if we want to transition from fossil fuel appliances to electric, then we need a plan. And it's a very simple process. You answer a couple of questions, put in your address, you set your priorities, and it generates a plan for you. And those priorities, the ones that are listed here, are lower my energy bills and lower my climate impact. There are other priorities like maximizing your incentives or improving your health and comfort. So whatever's a priority for you, you plug it in and it generates a nice plan. And there are two component parts to the plan. The first part is the pre-work. So the things you want to do to prepare. We mentioned the energy audit earlier. That's a good place to start, is to assess your home for whether it's airtight and whether it has sufficient insulation. Each project includes the incentives associated with that project, the impact on your utility bill, any upfront costs. Remember that the upfront costs here are nationwide. This is a national program, and so those numbers may be different in this area, but something to keep in mind. The second piece here is rewiring your home to get it ready for electric. So that's the pre-work, and then it goes into the projects. And these are the things that we just discussed in the inventory. So do you want to install solar panels? Do you want to purchase an electric vehicle? Do you want to install a heat pump hot water heater or upgrade to heat pumps and weatherization? We talked about the heat pump clothes dryer and the induction stove. So these are all the things that we just discussed in a planning document so that you can really drill down and plan for the replacement of each. And if you look further under the review project section, and we'll do that for the induction stove, it gives you even more information, gives you a little bit of an introduction. Why do you want to do it? What are some of the benefits? Who's it for? When's appropriate time to replace it? It'll talk about the cost benefit analysis, of whether you should replace the appliance. It'll review the rebates and credits. It'll give you a product guide and some additional information. So it is a really valuable resource to take you through this process. And it's important to plan ahead because you need to replace the appliance, and I can't stress this enough, before it reaches its useful life. Your sense of urgency might be based on the age of your appliance, but also your willingness to lower your carbon emissions. So, you may want to do it well in advance of its useful life just to reduce your household carbon footprint. But let's take a look at the useful lives and to get an idea of sort of timeframes. So this gives you an average lifespan of various appliances we discussed. The hot water heater, it's more like 13 to 15 years. Stove, 10 years plus. Your furnace, 10 to 15 years. A boiler, 15 to 30 years. But the important thing is, what will you do if one of these appliances break down? You don't want to be caught in an emergency situation. You don't want to be in the middle of the winter and need heat. And if your furnace or your boiler breaks down, it's not the time to start researching alternatives at that point, right? So you want to replace these on your own timetable, and identifying how old your appliances are and setting up a schedule to replace them makes a lot of sense. So finally, I want to talk about some additional incentives through NYSERDA and the state program. The first is an income-based benefit. You could get $5,000 to $10,000 for energy improvement projects if, depending on the household size and income, and if you fall into these ranges, then I suggest that you contact our local community energy advisor, Frankie Lead.
An energy audit, like who would you call?
So I would call Frankie.
Oh, and she would direct you to.
Yeah, so the NYSERDA program, the NYSERDA website, they have people that qualify in this area. So regardless of most anything that you want to do to qualify for some of the NYSERDA programs, you want to get a NYSERDA certified contractor. And they have a find a contractor search feature on their website that can direct you. The other thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is through our Nyack 2030 program, we've gotten people in the community who are ambassadors. So people who have done energy audits, bought an EV, put in on solar, and we could put you in touch with them, and then you could get their perspective on what they did and who they used. And I put my email address on this slide, so if you want to reach out to me directly, please feel free.
Steve, I've got a question from the chat.
All right?
Nancy asks, how can we get information about signing up for community solar?
So again, the nyack2030.com website, one of the first things you'll see when you go to that site is the community solar information. These flyers are at Village Hall and around the village. There's a QR code that you could use to access the site to sign up directly. So there are a number of ways of signing up, but those are just two.
So let me just clarify, if you want to say this. If you go to the Nyack 2030 website, you'll go to the project page for community solar, and there's a link there to this wonderful page that's really easy to sign up, and all you need is your utility bill number and your address.
Yeah, I've done it, it's very simple, take you a couple of minutes to sign up for it. And again, you don't have to give up your existing electric provider, whatever it is. This runs in tandem with that. And the benefit for promoting solar is you'll see upwards of a 5% discount on your energy bills, on your electric bills. Any other questions?
Any of
Thomas?
those programs also apply to commercial buildings?
That's a good question.
Community solar does. I mean,
Yeah, so if you're referring to the incentive programs, I don't have a good answer for you on that. I think,
The other guys would pay for that?
I think some small businesses may qualify for it. But I could research it and let you know. But it's a good question.
there are tax incentives for commercial buildings.
Like, are they also tied to the income levels of the business then?
I don't know about that. I think that what I know about it is that you need to have some sort of way of showing that you're reducing, like your gas usage through the thing that you're doing. Like if you went to get a new heat pump and you already had heat pumps, you can't use it for that because you're not really accomplishing.
Yeah, but it's a good question. I'll get you an answer on that.
And Frankie Lee, when I had a question about that, I reached out to Frankie Lee and she researched, my situation and got back to me, so that's really good.
Any other questions? All right, yes, George.
Can the incentives be combined, like if the 30% only applied to one of the actions you took, but if you did a second action, the 30% would apply to that as well? So it's based on the project, not on the total?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. You don't cap out.
Correct.
So if you got 30% for, putting in a new panel and also to do solar, then it'll apply to both.
I got you.
Yeah. Yes.
If you did the work in the last year, does that still work?
Well, you mean in 2024?
Yeah, or 23?
So if you did it in 24 and it's a tax credit, then I'd say for sure you'd be eligible for it because you're not going to apply for that until 2025. So if it's for this year, that's fine. A rebate wouldn't apply, right? Because even if you buy one now, with the rebates that I identified earlier, they're not in place yet. And they won't be in place until New York gets approved by the Department of Energy. So those, if you buy something now, you're not going to get that rebate. But for the tax credits, I don't know if you did it in 2023, whether you'd be eligible for that. You probably have to talk to your accountant about that.
You just keep track with the Department of Energy to see when the rebates are gonna be in.
So I would imagine that once we get approved, you're going to see a lot of marketing and communications to let people know that they're in place. Because it's very, very big. I mean, you saw the number of potential products that would qualify for a rebate. The dryer, the hot water heater, the electrical panel, the wiring. There's a whole host of things that we're sort of waiting on. I have an electric dryer and I'm looking to purchase a heat pump dryer. And I'm just waiting for that rebate to come in.
But they said the cost, you say $30 a year, and that upfront cost is $1,300. So you're not doing it on a financial, it's not a financial decision.
So it's not strictly a financial decision. I don't mind saving some money. My dryer is fairly old and the venting is problematic for me. So I used to work in a school district and I saw 2 fires out of our dryer, out of a school dryer. One was lint and the other was another material. And so there's a number of reasons to do it, but closing up the hole to the outside is a big reason that I'd like to do it also, not to have that vent going out to the outside is a significant benefit for me. I was in Europe and stayed in Airbnb and actually used one of these, and it wasn't directly drained. It was in a closet somewhere, and you just had to take the reservoir of water and dump it after you used the thing, and it was great. Yes.
But these IRA money is expiring soon?
So, not soon. There is a 2032 sunset on most of and I'm glad you brought that up because, that's a long time in the future. But importantly, there's no fixed amount of money. And this is something that has been discussed a bit in the press, that when this was passed, this legislation was passed, there was an estimate as to how much it would cost, but there was no fixed pool of money that was going to be distributed. So if everyone wants to take advantage of it, then everyone can, regardless of what that ends up costing for the program. So,
Even if we would have a different president in a couple of months,
well, it's legislation, so.
Congress stop the program?
The legislation, I mean, they could slow roll it maybe, but the legislation can't be stopped by executive action. So,
Congress could stop.
you'd have to have 2 houses of Congress, 60 senators approving it, and then it has to be signed by the president. So it's tall order for almost anything to get done, let alone reversing something like this. Yes?
Could you just say again, on the Rewiring America site, the way they list the incentives and rebates, what's in there, or what are they, what data are they gathering from different localities? I think you said it, but I didn't quite get that.
So, couple of things. On the rebate side, they're almost exclusively looking at the Inflation Reduction Act. So you're not going to see state-based incentives as part of this. What I was referring to is the upfront cost associated with a various project. So a heat pump hot water heater, they're identifying $3,500 to $6,300 to install a heat pump hot water heater. That is a national number that they've come up with. I installed a heat pump hot water heater. It cost me $1,400 for the unit and $1,000 for the installation. And I got $1,000 rebate from O&R to offset it. But there were no other rebates. So, and I actually took it off my taxes because at the time, you could take it off as a tax credit. I think it was a tax credit. So, so it was something I needed to do, and
It cost you how much?
it was $2,400. But net, then $1,000 off, so that's $1,400 plus 20% off of that for taxes.
So that seems like it would be a nice thing to put out there to explain to people your local info on what it costs to actually do this.
Yeah, but remember the incentives. So I think that would be good to kind of compare the cost of replacing a natural gas heater with a heat pump heater, hot water heater. But when the rebates get implemented, it's going to really be a game changer for that calculus. And I mean, we could do it now with what exists currently, but it's going to be a big difference when you see those rebates come out.
So do you have to wait to buy? and do
Yes.
this until that?
Yeah, it's not going to be retroactive,
And then
as
just
I
how long
understand
does
it.
it last? How many years?
Well, I think it would be about the same. The heat pump, that's not really what's gonna fail. If anything, I would say it would last a little longer. What fails on a hot water heater is, the heat at the bottom of it corroding the bottom of the, the cylinder. So, I don't have a specific answer for you, but I gotta imagine it would be comparable.
Does anybody know when these incentives are gonna kick in or not really?
Well, the estimate now is end of 2024, end of this year or the beginning of 2025. That's sort of the time frame. And what I mentioned earlier is that New York was one of the first to apply, so we should be one of the first to know.
Another thing to consider as you're making the plans for installing a heat pump is that there will be, probably in the fairly near future, heat pumps that have refrigerants that are much better to use than the current ones that have a problem with refrigerants that are available now is that they have a really high global warming potential, much higher than carbon dioxide. So if they leak, it's a real problem because it just blows away your whole carbon footprint.
Yeah, the newer units are using R32, and if you could find a unit that uses, that's the refrigerant, R32, it's better than the current, what is it, 410A? 410A, what Marcy was pointing out is that if you have a leak and that escapes, that's actually like 4,000 times what the same carbon would be. You want to make sure that a heat pump is installed by professional HVAC contractors. I get a little, I'm more of a do-it-yourself person, but I get a little nervous for these do-it-yourself Mr. Cool type of, Mr. Heat Pump type of things where, you want to pressure test your lines, and I'm not sure the average person has the capability of doing that. Yes?
This only really works if you're using renewable energy as a source, right? Your community aggregation, because otherwise, if you're using fossil fuels, you're not really getting the benefit. What is the community choice aggregation price per kilowatt hour now? Is it decent, or is it, what the
Well, I think it's on here. This is actually my bill.
right?
And you could see that it's all zeroed because this is a year that this is a month that all my solar panels paid for all my
That was nice to see.
electricity. And I mentioned earlier, there's a basic surcharge, which is understandable, that $20 or so is for O&R to maintain the lines. I'm still using
So if
grid.
you're using a solar panel here, though, this is nothing. Oh, this is a community.
Yeah, so anything, if my solar panels don't, and sometimes in the winter, they don't fully cover all the usage, then the balance gets paid through the community choice aggregation. And it's like 13 cents. I'm not sure, it's right up there under supply charges. It's 13 cents a kilowatt hour.
So I just, while you're back on this, when you were talking about this, I wanted people to understand also that Nyack's numbers aren't as high as you said, because it's only 80% you said of the eligible customers, and there's a set that wouldn't be eligible to get the solicitation for various reasons, including, there's some people that opt out, but there are also people who already have contracts who wouldn't get the solicitation, and other, some others. And I just wanted to clarify that, people have energy service contracts. Sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. And one of the reasons that it's a benefit to have Rockland Community Power is because they're well vetted, and you can sort of take that guesswork out that you're gonna, have somebody turning around and raising up your rates, and you likely have a lot of people have experienced, so.
It's a good point. That's the ESCO, the Energy Services Company. So you could get a contract through a third-party provider. Even if it's renewable, sometimes the renewable aspect of it is questionable because it may be renewable because they're buying offsets, like with trees or forests that are not going to be knocked down, but they're getting a credit for it anyway.
Is there enough renewable being produced to provide the service that people are expecting will be available with renewable? Is it
I have to imagine so.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
this Rockland Community Power actually, against another benefit of it, is that it's New York State renewable energy.
Right.
And the other, and that sort of sister program, the community solar, is
Right.
to promote the building of solar farms
Right.
in New York State.
So a few years back in Texas, there was a freeze, and people that had elected these companies that were alternative electric suppliers ended up getting like bills for $10,000 for a month. How do we, like that, I did get a solicitation, and I was like, I'm not going anywhere near it, I was nervous. But
yes.
I didn't realize it was an aggregate for Rockland, and so, I mean, is there any security against that?
So there are, this area and this plan can't be equated in any way to Texas. Texas is their own power system.
Isolated power system.
Yes, and actually, I gotta give Texas a bit of credit because they have implemented a lot of renewables in Texas. And actually, during that freeze, the renewables did better than the natural gas.
Right.
But be that as it may, there are two things we're talking about here. The supply of electricity is through the Community Choice Aggregation Program. And Rockland Community Power is sort of the overriding agency that's managing that.
It's really not an agency. Each village who participates in Rockland Community Power, they're not just two villages, because it's the town of Orangetown, the town of Clarkstown, the village of Haverstraw, Upper Nyack, and they all passed local laws saying that they were able to do this and participate in this aggregation of Rockland, and it's called Rockland Community Power. It's administered by a company called Jewel, and they organize this. They put out an RFP. They're putting out a new one now, so the rate is probably going to change. But they put out an RFP and sort of oversee the whole thing, so that the villages or the towns get a good contract. But the villages and towns in Rockland Community Power don't all have the same requirements. For example, in the town of Orangetown, the leadership decided over these past two contracts that they did not want to get renewable energy. They're in an aggregation, they have that vetting going on, so that people have this chosen default supply of their electricity. People don't have to choose. It's like no longer it's O&R choose, it's this choice. But they, in Orangetown, decided that they wanted to have non-renewable energy.
Right.
All the other communities are buying green, but that's what they do.
Is Nyack also an opt-out as Upper Nyack? 'Cause
Yes.
okay, so then why do you want to get more people if they have to opt out?
Well,
They opted out and now you want them back?
So there are, and Marcy alluded to this earlier, there are groups of individuals that have either a energy services company contract. They did not opt in or opt out because they didn't even get the solicitation because they weren't in with O&R when we went out and asked people about it. So that's a group of people that we want to switch from whatever their contract is, if it's not renewable,
Yeah.
to the CCA because it is renewable. So the more people we can get into the CCA, we could sort of guarantee that they're taking advantage of renewable energy. There are individuals who maybe were confused, and when they got the thing, they said, well, I'm not signing up for this, and they went to O&R. And we want to reach out to them to explain that this is a vetted program, it's renewable energy, it's being supported by the village governments, and there's no risk here because it's been vetted. You're not going to have a cancellation fee or rates being changed on you without notification. So there's a number of benefits to be on this, participate in the community choice aggregation. And, you know, they're going out to bid, so there's some volume discounts that they're getting also. So, you know, 13 cents for 100% renewable energy may be slightly higher than what you would get in O&R, but you know that's what you're gonna get. If there's a price shock and prices go up, then you're subject to that, you know, in the case that you brought up. So what else can we talk about? You all ready to do the plan?
Yes.
Yeah, I strongly suggest that, well, we'll post these slides on the Nyack 2030 website. I don't know if the library will post them. And so the Rewiring America there's a link to the website right there. There's a lot of links built into the presentation that will help you along. But I strongly urge you to go to the Nyack 2030 website, explore that. And I have to say, a lot of the links there go to NYSERDA. So NYSERDA, I think, has done a really good job in explaining a lot of the, you know, various things that we talked about here. All these appliances and the programs that they run. And they're simple explanations, and they provide a level of detail also that you may want. Like, for example, you know, you want to get a car, you want to get an EV, but you don't know which ones qualify for the credit, right? So you could call a dealer and ask them, but I got to tell you, dealers are not that familiar with these credits. You have to go knowing what you want. So to go to their website and take a look at the cars and the different options and see what their costs are and what you can get in a rebate, very, very helpful. So we're trying to do something like that here in Nyack to tailor it to this area and ensure that, you know, the community has the information that they need in order to make the decisions. The last thing you want to do is get stuck with your hot water heater breaking down because you didn't take the steps to replace it early enough. And I had that experience happen to me. My next door neighbor asked me about it. I explained all about a heat pump hot water heater. I sent him some information on it. He was interested in it. And the next thing I know, I saw his hot water heater on the street, and I saw a box with natural gas on it. It's like almost there, almost there.
Yeah, when they got away.
That's right. That's right. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming out. I really appreciate it.